The air in the training hall was cold and smelled of metal. It was a huge room with walls made of shiny gray panels. The light from the ceiling was bright and white, leaving no shadows anywhere. In this room, 20 young humans stood in a straight line. They wore simple gray training clothes. They were all tired. Their bodies ached. Their muscles felt weak. They were on the Vexian orbital drill platform. It was a big space station where the Vexians trained their soldiers. The Vexians were a very powerful species. They were taller than humans. They had long arms and legs. They moved with a smooth, quick grace that made humans look slow and clumsy. The Vexians had agreed to train this group of humans, but it was not a friendly agreement. It was a political one. The Vexians thought it was a waste of their time. In front of the human line stood their instructor. His name was Kale. He was a Vexian. He wore a dark, form-fitting uniform. But the most frightening thing was his face, or the lack of one. He wore a smooth chrome mask. It had no eyes, no nose, no mouth. It was just a blank, shiny surface. His voice came from the mask. It was a flat, electronic buzz. It had no feeling in it. For the last 3 hours, Instructor Kale had been running them through drills. They were simple drills, running, lifting, climbing, but he made them do these things over and over. He never seemed to get tired. He watched them struggle without a word. His silent mask was worse than any angry face. Gina was one of the recruits. She stood in the middle of the line. She was of average height with dark hair tied back neatly. Her body was trembling with exhaustion, but her mind was sharp and clear. She watched Kale. She studied the way he moved. She listened to the nothingness in his voice. Next to her stood Day. He was a quiet young man. He was strong, but even his strength was being tested today. He kept his eyes forward, trying to hide how hard he was breathing. Instructor Kale finally spoke. His voice cut through the quiet hall. Cease. The humans stopped what they were doing. They stood at attention, waiting. Kyle walked slowly down the line. His masked face turned to look at each one of them. Your performance is inadequate, he buzzed. Your stamina is low. Your speed is pathetic. You are slow. You are soft. You are flawed, no one replied. They had learned that talking only made it worse. He stopped in front of a young man who was sweating heavily. Your respiratory system is inefficient. You gasp for air like a fish on land. He moved to a young woman whose arms were shaking. Your muscle groups fail independently. A Vexian body supports itself. Yours betrays you. He came to stand in front of Gina and Day. His mask reflected their tired faces back at them. Your species clings to the idea of teamwork, he said, his voice dripping with scorn. It is a crutch for the weak. A single Vexian warrior is worth 10 of you, because a Vexian is perfect. A human is a collection of errors. Gina's jaw tightened. She kept her eyes forward, but she could feel the anger growing inside her. This wasn't training. This was just cruelty. Kale gave a new command. Gravity simulation. Level 8. Crawl to the far wall and back, now. A deep hum filled the room. Suddenly, it felt like a heavy weight was pressing down on all of them. Gina felt her knees buckle. Level 8 was far beyond Earth's normal gravity. Moving was agony. Simply standing was a fight. Move! Kale's voice was sharp. The recruits started to crawl. It was a slow, painful process. Their hands and knees scraped against the hard floor. Their breaths came in ragged pants. They helped each other up when someone stumbled. This seemed to annoy Kale the most. Stop assisting the weak links, he buzzed. Let them fail. Let them see their own worthlessness. They kept helping each other. It was the only way they could make it. After what felt like an eternity, they finally finished the crawl. They stumbled back into their line, their bodies screaming in pain. Kale did not let them rest. Water break. 53 seconds, he announced. A small dispenser emerged from the wall. The recruits hurried to it, taking small cups of water. Their hands shook so badly they could barely drink. Gina and Day stood together, leaning against the wall for support. This is impossible, Day whispered, his voice hoarse. He is not trying to teach us. He is trying to break us. Gina took a slow sip of water. She looked over at Instructor Kale, who stood perfectly still, his mask showing no emotion. I know, she said quietly, her voice low and steady. He is not an instructor. He is a bully. He wants us to believe we are nothing. Her words were soft, but Kale's audio sensors were advanced. His head turned sharply. The smooth chrome mask focused directly on her. The quiet hum of the station seemed to grow louder. He walked towards her. Each step was precise and silent. The other recruits noticed and fell silent. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the tired humans. He stopped, so close to Gina that she could see the tiny distortions in her reflection on his mask. "Recruit," the electronic voice buzzed, devoid of all emotion. "You have a critique of my methods?" The entire hall was frozen. Dai looked at Gina, his eyes wide with warning. No one ever talked back to a Vexian. It was the first and most important rule. Gina took a slow breath. She stood up straight, pushing herself away from the wall. She met the blank, reflective surface of his mask. She knew she should stay quiet. She knew it was the safe thing to do, but the words came out anyway. They were clear and firm. "I do, sir," she said. "We learn through instruction, not through degradation." A sharp metallic hiss came from Kale's mask. It was the first real sound of emotion any of them had heard from him. It was the sound of pure, cold anger. The silence in the training hall was absolute. It was a heavy, pressing silence, broken only by the faint hum of the station's systems. The human recruits stood perfectly still. They did not dare to move. They did not dare to breathe too loudly. Gina's words hung in the air between them and the chrome-masked instructor. They were the most dangerous words any of them had ever heard. Instructor Kale took a single step closer to Gina. The smooth, blank mask was now only a hand's breadth from her face. She could see the tiny, distorted reflection of her own determined eyes staring back from its surface. "Degradation," he buzzed, the electronic voice low and menacing, "is the first lesson for inferior species. It is the foundation. It scrapes away your pride. It shows you the truth of your weakness. It teaches you your place." He did not raise his voice. That was what made it so frightening. The calm, flat tone suggested that what he was saying was a simple, undeniable fact. Like gravity. He turned his head slowly, the mask scanning the line of nervous recruits. "All of you cling to your foolish ideas of respect and fairness. These are concepts for creatures who have the luxury of being soft. The universe is not fair. It is strong or it is nothing." His mask swung back to Gina. "You believe you deserve instruction. You believe you deserve a reason. You believe you deserve anything at all. This belief is your primary flaw." He pointed a long, gloved finger towards the center of the training hall. "You, recruit Gina. Move to the center, now." Gina's heart was beating hard against her ribs. She glanced at Day. His face was pale, but he gave her a tiny, almost invisible nod. She stepped out of the line and walked to the spot Kale had indicated. The floor was cold beneath her thin training shoes. The other recruits watched, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and sympathy. They all knew what was coming. This was a public lesson, a demonstration. "Assume the position of attention," Kale commanded. Gina stood straight, her shoulders back, her hands at her sides, her eyes looking forward. Instructor Kale began to pace slowly in a circle around her. His voice was a lecture drone aimed at all of them but focused entirely on her. "Observe the human form," he began. "Note the inefficiencies. The spine is a fragile column, prone to injury. The knees are a poorly designed hinge. The neck exposes the primary nerve pathway. It is a design of compromises and failures." He stopped behind her. "A Vexian spine is a reinforced carbon composite structure. It cannot be broken by simple pressure. Our joints rotate a full 360 degrees. Our vital areas are shielded by a secondary bone layer." He moved to stand in front of her again. The blank mask was like a wall. "Your circulatory system is a slow, liquid-based mess. It requires a powerful pump that can easily fail. You overheat. You freeze. You are vulnerable to 1,000 atmospheric conditions that a Vexian would not even notice." Gina stood perfectly still. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She listened to every word. And with every word, the cold anger inside her grew. It was not a hot, reckless anger. It was a sharp, clear, and focused anger. He was not just insulting her. He was insulting her entire species. He was dismissing everything humans were, everything they had overcome. Kale continued his cold, clinical breakdown of the human body. He spoke of weak lungs, of inefficient digestion, of a brain that was too emotional and too slow. Gina had heard enough. The words came out before she could stop them. They were calm. They were measured. But they were a direct challenge. "Respectfully, sir," she said, her voice cutting through his lecture. "Your assessment is outdated." The air seemed to get even colder. One of the other recruits gasped softly. Kale stopped his pacing. He became utterly still. The silence was deafening. "Explain," the electronic voice buzzed. It was dangerously quiet. Gina kept her eyes locked on the mask. "Human resilience is not measured in single muscle efficiency. You judge each part of us alone. But we are not built that way. Our strength is in the whole. It is in cumulative endurance. A human can keep going long after a perfect system has shut down to protect itself." She took a small breath. "And it is in adaptive problem solving. You see our varied body types as a flaw, but it is our greatest tool. We do not just overcome our environment. We change it. We build tools. We work together. That is not a crutch. It is a multiplier. You are judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree, and you are calling the fish flawed for failing." For a long moment, there was no sound. Then a sharp metallic hiss came from Kale's mask. It was a sound of pure, unfiltered rage. The calm, lecturing tone was gone. "You compare your species to a simple aquatic animal? A fitting analogy." He took a step towards her. "But even a fish knows when it is out of its depth." His hand moved. It was not a slow movement. It was not a telegraphed movement. It was a blur of dark fabric and gloved force. It was faster than any human punch. It was an open-handed strike, meant not to injure seriously, but to humiliate and shock. The sound of the impact was a loud, sickening crack that echoed off the hard walls. The force of the blow snapped Gina's head to the side. White light exploded behind her eyes. A sharp coppery taste filled her mouth. Her vision swam. The entire side of her face felt like it was on fire. She stumbled back 2 steps, her balance gone. From the line, Day took a sudden, instinctive step forward. His hands clenched into fists. His body was tense, ready to rush to her aid. But before he could move, Gina's eyes found his. Her gaze was blurry with pain, but it was clear and sharp with meaning. It was a command. "Stop, do not." She forced her body to straighten. She pushed through the dizziness and the pain. She slowly brought her head back to face forward. A single trickle of blood ran from the corner of her lip down her chin. It stood out stark and red against her pale skin. She did not raise a hand to wipe it away. She did not cry out. She simply stood there, breathing slowly and deeply. Her eyes, however, were no longer just filled with anger. Now they held a cold, terrifying fury. She looked at the blank chrome mask, and she did not see an all-powerful instructor. She saw a target. Instructor Kale stood before her, expecting to see fear. Expecting to see submission. Expecting to see broken spirit in her eyes. He saw none of those things. He saw only a cold, calculating focus. The kind of focus a predator has just before it strikes. He raised his hand again, not to strike, but to point at her. The electronic voice was once again flat, but it now carried a hint of something new, something uncertain. "Let that be a lesson in—" he began, but he never finished his sentence. The word was left hanging in the air. A lesson in what? Obedience, power? His own superiority? Gina did not care to hear it. The time for listening was over. The sharp pain in her face was no longer just pain. It was a signal. It was a trigger. It focused her mind, clearing away the last traces of dizziness. The world seemed to slow down. She saw every detail with perfect, painful clarity. The tiny scratches on the floor, the faint reflection of the lights on Kale's mask, the slight shift in his weight as he stood, confident in his victory. Her body moved. It was not the flowing, continuous motion of the Vexians. It was not a blur. It was something else. It was an explosion of purpose. It was a single, perfectly timed action. Every muscle, every nerve, every thought was directed towards one goal. She used the momentum from his strike. As her head had snapped to the side, her body had coiled slightly. Now she uncoiled. She pivoted on the ball of her back foot. Her hips twisted, generating power. Her right hand did not form a fist. A fist was for brawling. A fist was blunt. This was not a brawl. This was a statement. Her fingers straightened, rigid and tight. Her thumb pressed tight against her palm. Her hand became a spear. Kale saw the movement. To a human, it would have been too fast to see. But to a Vexian, it was just movement. He registered it. He began to process it. He started to decide how to react. He had 1,000 options. Block, dodge, counter-strike. But Gina did not give him time to choose. Her strike was not aimed at his body. His uniform was surely armored. His flesh was likely tough. Her strike was aimed at the symbol, at the smooth, perfect chrome mask that hid his face and his pride. Her spear hand shot forward. It was a direct linear motion. No wind-up. No warning. It was the shortest distance to its target. The tips of her fingers, driven by the full force of her body's pivot, hit the exact center of the mask. There was a sound. It was not the sound of a punch. It was not a thud. It was a sharp, high-pitched crack. It was the sound of shattering ice. It was the sound of breaking glass. A web of fine, silvery lines exploded across the surface of the mask. For a split second, the chrome surface held together, a map of fractured light. Then the center of the web gave way. A shower of tiny, sharp shards of polished metal fell to the floor, tinkling like broken bells. The entire event, from her first movement to the shards hitting the floor, took less time than a human heartbeat. It was faster than the blink of an eye. It was faster than a Vexian's thought. Before the last shard had settled, Gina was already moving back. Her hand returned to her side. Her feet shifted back into the position of attention. She stood straight as if she had never moved at all. The only signs of the struggle were the slow trickle of blood on her lip and the intense, fiery focus in her eyes. For a moment, there was absolute dead silence, then a choked, guttural sound came from Instructor Kale. It was a raw, organic sound. It was not filtered through a voice synthesizer. It was the sound of pure, unfiltered shock. The fractured half of his mask, now loose, fell away from his face. It clattered loudly on the hard floor, the sound echoing in the silent hall. The face that was revealed was not what anyone expected. It was not a face of perfect, alien beauty. It was not a face of cool, superior calm. The skin was a pale gray mottled with darker patches. His eyes were large and dark, but now they were wide with utter disbelief. His mouth was open, his lips pulled back from sharp, pointed teeth in a snarl of pure primal rage. He looked furious. He looked humiliated. He looked emotional. The illusion was shattered as completely as his mask. The Vexian aides, who had stood as still as statues throughout the entire ordeal, now showed a reaction, a slight shift in their posture, a tiny turn of their own masked heads. They were stunned. Kale's hand came up to his face. His gloved fingers touched the exposed skin. He felt the air on it. He felt the eyes of all the humans on him. The invincible, perfect Instructor was gone. He was just a being, standing there with half a face exposed to everyone. The raw rage on his face deepened. The shock was being replaced by a burning, violent anger. This could not happen. This human, this inferior creature, had done this to him. She had violated his dignity. She had broken the symbol of Vexian control. A low growl rumbled in his chest. It was a real sound from a real throat. He looked at Gina. His exposed eye was blazing with hate. He took a step towards her. His body was trembling with the need for retaliation. Gina did not move. She did not back away. She stood her ground, meeting his furious gaze with her own calm, steady one. She had said what she needed to say. She had done what she needed to do. The message had been delivered. The silence was now filled with a new tension. It was the tension of what would happen next. The rules were broken. The Instructor had been unmasked. The balance of power had shifted in a single shocking moment. Kale raised his hand again. But this time it was different. This time energy began to crackle around his gloved fist. A faint blue light glowed, casting sharp shadows on his exposed face. This was not a slap for discipline. This was something else. This was something dangerous. He was no longer an instructor administering a lesson. He was an angry man about to make a very, very big mistake. The air crackled with the energy gathering around Kale's fist. The blue light pulsed, throwing the raw fury on his exposed face into sharp relief. He was no longer a disciplined instructor. He was a volcano of humiliation and rage about to erupt. The strike he was preparing was not for punishment. It was for destruction. Gina saw it. She saw the lethal intent in his one visible eye. But she did not flinch. She had made her choice. She stood straight, her bloodied face calm, ready to accept whatever came next. From the line of recruits, Day could not stay still any longer. He saw the energy building. He saw the murder in Kale's eye. He broke from the line, his own body tense, ready to throw himself in front of Gina. It was a hopeless gesture, but he had to try. But before Day could take a second step, and before Kale could unleash the energy blast, a new voice cut through the tension. It was a human voice. It was calm. It was firm. It was full of an authority that demanded to be heard. "Stand down, instructor." The voice came from the entrance of the training hall. Everyone turned. Commander Ryu stood there. He was a tall, older man with short gray hair and a stern face. He wore the uniform of a senior human officer. He had been observing the training session from a remote station, but he had seen enough. He had seen the strike. He had seen the shattering mask, and now he saw an instructor about to kill one of his recruits. He walked into the hall. His steps were measured and confident. He did not look at Gina or the other recruits. His eyes were fixed on Kale. Kale froze. The energy around his fist flickered and died. He slowly lowered his hand. The rage on his face was now mixed with a deep, seething resentment. He had been caught. He had been stopped by a human. Commander Ryu stopped a few feet away from Kale. He looked at the broken mask on the floor. He looked at the exposed, furious face of the Vexian. He looked at Gina, standing tall with blood on her lip. "It seems," Ryu said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room. "The lesson today was for you, Instructor Kale." Kale's lip curled into a snarl. "This recruit assaulted a superior officer. She will be nothing," Ryu interrupted, his voice hardening. "You struck her first. I have the recording. You escalated this from instruction to violence. She simply responded." He took a step closer to Kale, his gaze unwavering. "You assumed our slowness was weakness. You were wrong." Ryu turned now to address the whole room, his voice rising. "The Vexian body is a marvel of sustained efficiency. You can run faster for longer. You can process complex data streams. For a long, steady race, you are unmatched." He then turned his attention back to Kale's exposed face. "But the universe is not always a long, steady race. Sometimes it is a single moment, a flash, a spark." He pointed a finger at Gina, but his eyes were still on Kale. "You see, Instructor, the human nervous system is built for those sparks. We may not process at your speed for sustained movement, but our burst response, our reaction to a direct, immediate threat, is one of the fastest in the known galaxy." He let that sink in. The recruits were listening, their eyes wide. The Vexian aides were listening, their masked heads tilted. "You hit her," Ryu continued, his tone like steel. "You presented a direct physical threat. In that moment, her body did not think about running. It did not think about hiding. It assessed the threat and it eliminated it with the most efficient tool available." He gestured to the shattered mask on the floor. "She didn't just hit you back. She calculated. She aimed. She executed a surgical strike on the symbol of your authority. She did it in the time it took you to feel smug about hitting a young woman half your size. That is not weakness. That is terrifying, focused precision." Kale stood silent. The anger was still there, but it was now mixed with a dawning, horrible understanding. He had been outthought. He had been outmaneuvered on a fundamental level. "This training program was not created so that humans could learn to be Vexians," Ryu said, his voice returning to its calm, firm tone. "It was created so that we could learn to fight together, to combine our strengths, your endurance with our decisiveness, your power with our adaptability. You saw us as students to be broken. We came as potential partners. You failed to see that." He looked at the Vexian aides. "Instructor Kale is relieved of his duties, effective immediately. He will be confined to his quarters pending a full review of his conduct." The aides gave a slow, formal nod. They moved to flank Kale. For a moment it looked like he would resist. His fists were clenched. The fury on his face was a storm. But then his shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him. He had been defeated not just by a recruit, but by the truth of his own arrogance. He allowed the aides to lead him away. He did not look back at Gina. He could not bear to. As the door hissed shut behind them, the training hall was once again filled with silence. But this silence was different. It was not a silence of fear. It was a silence of awe. Commander Ryu finally turned to look at Gina. He walked over to her. He looked at the cut on her lip. He saw the steady resolve in her eyes. "Recruit," he said. "Are you all right?" Gina took a deep breath. "Yes, sir." Ryu gave a small, almost invisible smile. "You have a very direct way of making a point, Recruit Gina. It is a dangerous way. But today it was the right way." He looked at the other recruits. "The lesson is over for today. Dismissed." The recruits began to file out slowly, their heads buzzing with what they had just witnessed. Day waited for Gina. As they walked out together, the other recruits looked at her with a new kind of respect. It was not just because she had been brave. It was because she had shown them all what they were truly capable of. She had not just broken a mask. She had broken an idea. The story spread through the human sections of the station like fire. It did not travel through official reports. It traveled through whispers in the mess hall, through quiet conversations in the barracks. It was the story of the recruit who moved faster than a Vexian could think. The story of the shattered mask and the furious, exposed face beneath it. It was a story everyone needed to hear. Later that day, Gina and Day were summoned to Commander Ryu's office. The room was small and functional. A desk, a few chairs, and a large window looking out at the star-dotted blackness of space. Gina stood at attention in front of the desk. The cut on her lip had been cleaned and sealed with a thin layer of medical gel. Day stood beside her, a solid, quiet presence. Commander Ryu was not sitting behind his desk. He was standing by the window looking out. He turned to face them. His expression was serious but not angry. "At ease, recruits," he said. They relaxed their stance, but only a little. "The official review is underway," Ryu began. "Instructor Kale has been formally reprimanded. He will not be training humans again. The Vexian High Command is, embarrassed. They are also, for the first time, very interested." He picked up a data pad from his desk. "They have requested all the sensor logs from the training hall. They want to study the speed of your reaction, Gina. They did not believe it was possible." He put the pad down and looked at her. "What you did was incredibly dangerous. It was insubordinate. You could have been severely injured. You could have started an interstellar incident." Gina met his gaze. "I understand, sir. But," Ryu continued, a slight smile touching his lips, "it was also the most effective piece of diplomacy this program has seen since it started. They were not listening to our words. They were not listening to my reports. They saw us as slow, weak creatures trying to catch up to their greatness. You gave them a message they could not ignore." He walked around the desk and leaned against it. "You showed them a different kind of strength. One they do not have, one they do not understand. That is why they are interested. That is why they are scared." Day spoke for the first time. "What happens now, sir?" "Now," Ryu said, "the real work begins. Now they will take us seriously. A new instructor is being assigned. One who has read the report. One who knows what happened in that hall. The training will be different. It will be harder, but it will be fair. It will be based on respect, not contempt." He looked back at Gina. "You have rewritten the book on human-Vexian relations with one strike. The legend of the girl who shattered the mask is already spreading through the fleet. It is becoming a symbol. It is not a symbol of violence. It is a symbol of perception. It is a reminder that we are not weak. We are different. And our difference is our power." Later, Gina and Day found themselves in one of the station's common areas. It was a room with large viewports that showed the endless expanse of space. A beautiful blue and green planet hung in the distance, half in shadow. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. Dee shook his head slowly. "I still cannot believe it. One moment he was hitting you. The next, his mask was just gone." He looked at her. "How did you even do that? How did you know you could?" Gina touched the smooth medical gel on her lip. "I didn't know," she said softly. "Not for sure. I just saw the target. I saw the blank mask that represented everything he was doing to us. And I knew I had to break it. The anger was just fuel. The movement itself just happened." "You know what this means, don't you?" Dee said. "You are famous, or you will be. Every new recruit will hear this story. They will know your name." Gina sighed. She did not feel like a hero. She felt tired. She had just been standing up for herself. For all of them. "I don't care about being famous," she said. "I just wanted him to stop. I wanted him to see us." "And he did," Day said. "He saw us. They all see us now." He was right. The atmosphere on the station had already changed. When the Vexians they passed in the corridors looked at the humans now, their gaze was different. It was no longer a look of bored superiority. It was a look of curiosity, a look of caution. Some even showed a flicker of something that might have been respect. The story of the shattered mask was more powerful than any weapon. It was an idea. The idea that humans were not to be underestimated. The idea that their quiet slowness hit a lightning-fast spark. The idea that their greatest strength was their ability to adapt and react in a single, decisive moment. Gina looked out at the stars, at the vast, unknown universe. It was a dangerous place, a place of powerful species like the Vexians. But now she felt a new sense of hope. Humanity did not need to become like the Vexians to survive. They just needed to be themselves. They needed to be smart. They needed to be resilient. And when the moment called for it, they needed to be fast. She turned to Day. Someone had to do it. They weren't listening to our words, so I gave them a message they could understand. A small, determined smile finally appeared on her face. It was a human smile, full of emotion and strength. The next time a Vexian looks at a human, she said, they will not just see a weak, slow creature. They will remember the crack of a breaking mask. And they will think twice.